I'm really pleased to have a conversation with my colleague Alfredo Tan. Alfredo has joined McMaster in the DeGroote School of Business as an industry professor, and we'll be engaging him with our EMBA in digital transformation. But Alfredo has also joined our program on innovation governance for board directors, which focuses on how do boards play an active role in supporting an organization's innovation agenda. Alfredo, you did a morning session for us today on exponential innovation. And I'm wondering if you could just share with us again some of your thoughts on what are kind of the big disruptive technologies coming down the pipe that organizations, not the big tech companies, but mainstream business need to be mindful of.
Sure. Maybe I'll start by even talking about the current disruptive technology, which some organizations have yet to even deal with, let alone the exponential one. So I think mobile is the most disruptive and adopted consumer behavior we've ever seen in the history of humanity, and I think some companies are just playing catch up in that area. I think as a result of that, you'll also start to see companies invest in machine learning and artificial intelligence, but not general artificial intelligence, but more specific, solving problems in a specific industry or in a specific use case. And then I would probably call out virtual reality, augmented reality, with more immediate focus on augmented reality, and then virtual reality being a longer time horizon.
I loved your description of AR and VR, and maybe you can just share for the group this notion of the connection between VR and AR.
Sure. I can't take credit though. The CEO of NVIDIA, I think, has articulated it the best, and when he said it, I sort of repeated that I need to tell that story. Essentially, virtual reality is what you create using artificial intelligence and machine learning to create a world that doesn't exist. And augmented reality is the ability to take through a portal objects that exist in the virtual world and bring them into the physical world, right? So virtual reality is this place where you experience something that doesn't exist through an optical lens, and augmented reality is the ability to overlay digital objects in the physical world. But his description of being able to move virtual objects between this reality and virtual reality sort of is a much better way to articulate that.
And you actually talked about some concrete examples of how that's manifesting itself in the physical world, products.
I mean, one that you can imagine when you're viewing a car in a dealership, you don't have to have a salesperson walk you through. You can have your mobile phone, augmented reality app or engine over the car, so you can see the technical specifications, the inside of the car, some of the features, or if most people do not like using manuals, maybe you're inside your console of the car and you're able to move the phone around to dictate how to use some of the functionality. And one day, maybe the entire windshield of a car will become a augmented reality engine or app, where most of the things that you can't see in the physical world come to life in a digital world.
Now, I'm kind of curious, because it's a program on innovation for board directors. And not to generalize, but Canadian board directors, as U.S. board directors, there's still a certain demographic profile. And that I find it interesting that when directors are surveyed, social media it certainly comes up as a key driver or disruptor of innovation, yet less than 15% of board directors are actually active social media users. So my point would be, when you talked about exponential innovation, how do you convey the opportunity and the risk to an audience that may not be as technically literate or savvy as your community?
Yeah, I think the first step is trying to convince them to at least use what the current technology is today, right? So I'll use, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. It's hard to imagine what the world could be unless you're actually using the tools that are present today, right? So it is a challenge to get people to imagine what augmented reality or virtual reality or what AI will do when the current technology of today isn't easily understood already. So one, I think there's either an education piece plus an experiential piece that needs to take place. Number two, I think the ability to storytell and sort of inspire people to think about what the future could be, and then how that translates into either a better guest experience or more revenue or whatever long-term KPI that you think is relevant. It's stitching the story to get people to be inspired by that, right? So a lot of times, as technology people, we take for granted that everyone understands what it could be, and often walking them through that journey and then telling them a story on how to get there and its possibilities is what excites people.
Now, you talked about your role as Chief Digital Officer today. It's 50% technology, and it's 50% culture in
Mm-hmm.
people. Maybe you can just expand a little bit on that people and culture side. So what is it in that space that you have to help nudge, support, get others to support?
Yeah, I think the technology piece, without belittling how complicated and difficult that is the easier of the two, right? Most people think innovation is related to technology, but not necessarily. Meaning, innovation is simply doing things better and then eventually getting to a point where you've done it so much better and so differently, it becomes disruptive. So it's sort of a spectrum. And the way to accomplish that is usually through a culture that allows you to move fast, fail fast, and learn fast, right? So some of the work that I'm doing inside WestJet isn't just on the technology stack, but it's working with our people and HR teams to help me find ways to work better as an organization and to even trial certain philosophies that worked in the sort of tech community or the startup community that may be somewhat new or foreign to larger legacy type organizations.
Well, maybe a final question. As we sort of wrap up our program with our board directors, we're going to be spending our time thinking about what are the questions that board directors should ask of their chief digital officer, their chief technology officer, and others. So if you were going to suggest 2 or 3 things that should be put on that list, what might they be?
I think one of them should be the appetite to not have revenue as the driver for why you're doing something. So the board question could then be framed as, if this isn't a driver of revenue in the short term, will it in the future? Number 2, what does it impact and why are we doing it? And 3, what problem are we trying to solve with the innovation we're trying to create, right? So it's trying to find different KPIs that are not purely focused on the short-term quarterly performance, but if we invest in this area, what are we trying to solve? And then number 2, is it even something that is in line with what we're trying to accomplish as a company? And if so, is that okay? Like, is it okay that it's not core to the business? And then if it isn't, why would we pursue it? And there's no right or wrong to that. It just has to be a question that's a good, healthy debate and conversation.
Well, thank you again for participating. Wonderful session this morning.
Thank you as well.